Und das ist ja vielleicht schon ein ganz guter, nicht Übergang, aber führt schon mal weiter zu Herrn Professor Peter Goldschmidt. Und ich darf Sie auch noch ganz kurz vorstellen, Sie waren, ich glaube, Sie kommen aus Mainz, das ist richtig, ne? Und Sie waren von 2002 bis 2007 wissenschaftlicher Mitarbeiter und Kurator an der Kunsthalle in Düsseldorf. Ich wollte erst sagen, da waren Sie ja schon mal hier in der Gegend, aber ich weiß ja, das ist ja falsch. Entschuldigung dafür. Danach waren Sie allerdings auch Chefkurator an der Tate Liverpool und haben dort die Liverpool Biennale geleitet. Und das ist vielleicht für diejenigen, die letztes Semester hier waren, ganz interessant. Wir hatten da die Künstlerin Jeanne van Heeswijk eingeladen und die hat von ihrem Projekt Homebake berichtet, was auch ein Projekt der Liverpool Biennale war. Also auch da gibt es lustigerweise wieder Verbindung, das wusste ich gar nicht. Nach ihrer Zeit in Liverpool waren Sie dann stellvertretender Direktor am MMK-Museum für moderne Kunst in Frankfurt am Main. Und Sie haben dort selbstverständlich, sage ich mal, zahlreiche Ausstellungen kuratiert und auch Publikationen dazu veröffentlicht. Und ich hatte mir jetzt einfach nur ausgeschrieben, eine davon war das Imaginäre Museum und das war in Zusammenarbeit mit der Tate Liverpool und dem Centre Pompidou in Metz. Genau, und nun leiten Sie, das muss ich mal kurz gucken, seit 2018 sind Sie Direktor des Museums Folkwangs in Essen und das Museum Folkwang feiert in diesem Jahr sein 100-jähriges Bestehen und Sie werden uns bestimmt auch nochmal auf ich glaube die Eröffnung ist sehr, sehr bald von den Feierlichkeiten. Genau, und Sie bekamen sozusagen auch 2021 eine Honorarprofessur für Kunst und Öffentlichkeit verliehen von der Folkwang-Universität der Künste in Essen. Genau. So, und ich freue mich, dass Sie es heute hergeschafft haben und bin gespannt auf Ihr Statement und nach dem Statement gehen wir dann quasi über in die Diskussion, damit das schon mal ein bisschen klarer ist. Und es ist vielleicht auf Englisch oder auf Deutsch, das entscheiden Sie.
Vielen Dank. Ja, einen schönen guten Abend. Ich habe gedacht, damit unsere Gesprächspartner von Warengruppe, Reza, Ismanto, ein bisschen mehr nachher auch in der Diskussion mitbekommen, von was wir tun. Ich habe Ihnen nur eine kurze Präsentation, ich würde es auf Englisch machen, wenn das für Sie okay ist. Mein Englisch ist sowieso broken English, ich glaube, das versteht jeder in Deutschland. Ist auf jeden Fall einfach. So, hi, Reza, Ismanto. I'll do it in English, so I hope just after my presentation we can start the discussion. What I would like to do today is give a brief introduction into a project that is actually opening this Saturday, 21st of May in Essen, Folkwang in the city, Folkwang die Stadt. And it's a project I've been working on over the course of the last 3 years, together with Markus Ambach. And Markus Ambach is one of the participants of Documenta this year, so I think it links very nicely to what Warengruppe has previously introduced. And I think there are a lot of commonalities with their thinking in this project, and I think there are also some commonalities to Baukultur and what Baukultur means today to us. So I hope to bridge between the two presentations so far, and after we just give a little kind of historic, very, very tiny historic summary of how art in public evolved over the course of the 20th century, 21st century, and then I'll hopefully start with a question to kick off our discussion. So what we're opening on Saturday is called Folkwang in die Stadt, and the idea behind this was born about 3 years ago when I kind of just started my appointment as the new director of the Museum Folkwang in Essen, and I felt we really need to connect more to the city, to the communities, to the people in the city, and I started to think about how to do this. So on one hand side, it has quite a lot to do with our own history, our own museum's history, and we are celebrating our anniversary, 100 years of Museum Folkwang in Essen, but it's actually 120 years, because the first Museum Folkwang was founded in 1902 in Hagen by Karl-Ernst Osthaus, and he had the idea to unite art and public, to really bring culture to the people of the rural area, which was much more industrial as we know it now, but of course we know it still from history books and images, and he felt that culture would have a pivotal role in kind of transforming societies and bringing kind of a better life to the workers of the rural area. So he was kind of very progressive in his thinking at that time, and over the course of the century I think many have kind of adapted to this thinking, and it has gone through different transformations. But so what we asked ourselves is, what does it mean to us today, 100 years or 120 years even after? What does it mean to connect to the public as a museum institution, which is quite famous in German and international art world, but it's also still a rather conventional museum. And how can we connect nowadays back to the ideas of the beginning of the 20th century, and how can we connect in particular to the city, to communities, to people, activists, and the topics of kind of urban life, I would call it. So Marco Sambach and I invited Marco Sambach, who's a specialist in kind of urban public art projects since more than 20 years, to start this thinking process with me. And we definitely didn't want to look at the city as a kind of exhibition area where we would kind of just invite some artists and choose some locations and then do kind of the usual standard festival as we know it for many biennials over the course of the last decades. So we tried to roll up the process in a different way. We started, okay, we are not inviting artists in the beginning. We are, first of all, we're going to have a dialogue and conversations and talks with many people who are already there in the city with their subjects. So we went to speak to communities, to initiatives, to activists, to city planners, to people from the city council, to kind of start-up kind of companies, really a wide range, and try to get a sense of the city and lots of kind of smaller and bigger initiatives that are already there. And from this we tried to develop the idea. So that was the first, the conversation was at the beginning. And then of course during the project we felt that, okay, conversations are really nice, but as Peter pointed out before, at some point you need to think about making these visible. Because without visualization you won't ever gain the effect that you want if you want to have a large effect on society and city planning and city ideas. So we try to think about kind of how to translate it into images, into kind of visualities. And at the beginning there was we kind of found a place which was for us kind of controversial in a way. It's a large roundabout in Essen, which is called the Berliner Platz, and you can see it on this image here in the middle. It's huge, and if you look at it in more detail, there are a lot of kind of city functions around this roundabout. For instance, this is Agentur für Arbeit, so the Office for Labor. There is a Funke-Mediengruppe, so we have this topic of media. There where the Green Meadow starts, it's a new city development called Grüne Mitte Essen. This large round building is the so-called Limbecker Platz, which is a huge shopping mall. So we have like Consum, media, city planning. Here, this is the roof of IKEA, which actually used to be historical, the entrance to the Krupp city, which was the kind of industrial part of the town, and till the beginning of the 20th century, the Krupp city was bigger than the actual city center. So it was enormous, this defect. So now it's the only, the first inner city IKEA. Now IKEA tries to change their strategic to bring IKEA into the cities, but actually in Essen there is already one. And we have the university quarter down here. We have like some entertainment facilities like the former Colosseum Theater. We have a Cinemax there. We have the Volkwang Musikschule there. We have the Weststadthalle, which deals with youth. And we have lots of traffic. Because this roundabout, with like sometimes 4 lanes, it's the biggest roundabout in Essen. It looks as from the automobiles city planning in the 1960s. Actually, it was opened in 2010, so it's not very old. And in the middle, there's just the Green Meadow. It's not accessible. So we have like a kind of a place to come together, like a square or a place, but it's not accessible. And this center that this is described by the roundabout is not a center, but more like a centrifugal. Okay. So you can see this in this diagram, what I'm just explaining, all these kind of ideas of kind of what urban life consists of in the city center is based around this circle around this roundabout, but in the middle is nothing, and you drive in with your car and you get like thrown out into any kind of direction of the city, but you never meet. And all these topics don't meet there. So this was at the beginning a metaphor. It was not really our idea necessarily to go to fill the gap, but now we're doing it. Over the course it developed, and we are building an eco-village on this roundabout for 10 weeks. That's just an animation with the sheep. I'll tell you something about the sheep later. But we have invited lots of initiatives from Essen who deal with kind of sustainability and ecology and different aspects. It starts from Essbare Stadt, who built like little gardens for children, youth centers, to cultivate like vegetables and others and stuff in the city center. We have initiatives dealing with permaculture. We have initiatives like Gießkannenhelden, who kind of collect rainwater to give water to trees in the city center. We have like saved some trees from eBay, which were supposed to be cut, which were planted there. But we also invited like a Essen-based startup company called Futur 2K, who are now have developed a prototype of a new housing, which is completely not only recyclable, it's kreislauffähig in German, so it's a little bit more than recyclable from these materials, and can be actually put together as almost like Lego pieces to bigger housing areas. And we have this first prototype, you see it on the left there, which is on part of this eco-village, but there's also Fridays for Future part of this eco-village. So we have really a lot of different initiatives, from small to big, from kind of more socially engaged to more kind of economically interested associations. We're trying over the course of the 10 weeks to kind of discuss all these different ideas around sustainability. There are also artists involved in that eco-village. We have Gabriele Oberkofler, for instance, here, it's an Italian artist who has collected seeds, or she's collecting seeds that are kind of vanishing or disappearing from agriculture because you have to apply for using seeds, and there's more and more monoculture in agriculture. So she's collecting these seeds and she's saving them, and she's planting them every year new to save them for future lives. So she will do this kind of sculptural installation with her seeds. We have this the tiny house module for its future. This is Markus Ambach, who I'm working with. We have lots of elements that can be used by anyone who's coming and want to plant anything. So this is kind of, and it's also the festival center for our project. The sheep that you saw in the animation, they will not be on the roundabout, but they will be very close to it. This is, you see this Grüne Mitte Essen, this kind of new housing residential area in the city center. There are big meadows, and we're working with Volker Köpperling, who's an artist and shepherd herself, but also with the shepherd from Oberhausen, Chefrei Oberhausen, Tobias Timm. And the artist has built this house for sheep from wool, sheep wool, and there will be 5 sheep living there over the course of the year, and they will be taken care of by residents there. So they're bringing them out in the morning to the meadow, and then bringing them back up in the evening. And there will be lots of explanations about what happens to the sheep industry. There's no sheep industry in Germany. So if you have like, the sheep wool is like Sondermüll, and it's cost like 18 cents a kilo if you want to throw it away. And sheep are usually only used in Germany to cultivate meadows, to like Rasenmäher basically. But the wool is very interesting material because you can use it for building, to isolate for heat and cold, to isolate for rumor and noise. You can use it as a dünner for planting. So there are many possibilities to use this material, and she's doing research with research institutions and universities about the future use of sheep wool. So this will all be explained in this project. But anyhow, from this kind of center around the roundabout, it was very important to us to go into the city center, into the city north, and there's a parcours now with 18 locations, with 18 projects that are in between art, social engagement, subject of sustainabilities, and we always try to connect these projects very closely to the local communities. And actually I put some flyers over there and free newspapers with the program, so please feel to pick one before you leave. This, for instance, is a project by Atelier Le Balto, who's Landschaftsarchitekten. It was built 2017 for the Grüne Hauptstadt Essen, and after that it has almost been forgotten. We asked Atelier Le Balto if we could recycle it, and they handed it over to the people of Essen now, and we built it new, or kind of partly new, and planted new vegetables and new flowers with lots of local communities, with Neue Arbeit Essen, with Kindertagesstätten, with Bürgerzentrum Weberplatz, and we have already organized that they will take care after the end of the project continuously for this. So we really tried not to implant too many things on top of the city, but really work with existing structures. There are projects in kind of abandoned places in the city center. That, for instance, is a former Chinese restaurant that got abandoned like 3 years ago, and we invited Polymère DMT, who's a Essen-based theater, a dance company by Fan Yung Lo, you see there, to make an installation about like 4 migrant stories based on the theater set. We open again a club called Naked, or Diamonds and Pearls, that was closed for, I think, almost a decade in the city center, and this will house an installation by Anu Kreuthoff with like dances from social media collected, more like 32 hours of material, like from all over the world, which kind of will revitalize this former club location, which is basically work from our collection. We work with Flitzmobil and the Essener Tafel in Kirche St. Gertrud, and invited Mascha Fese and Paula Erstmann, two artists who deal with the subject of food, to do a project there with the people who basically come to the Essener Tafel every day. We are also trying to work a lot with kind of urban life people from like kind of popular culture, let's call it. Like we're doing a project in a tattoo shop, Art Factors tattoo shop. They're doing an exhibition about the history of tattoos, and you can also get tattoos from Volkwang Works for free. We're working with Dark Ages, which is a Gothic fashion shop. So we're really trying also to work with the kind of subcultures or other kind of form of popular culture in the city center. Another kind of important project is the so-called Konsumreform, which is a shop where everyone can kind of rent a little shelf and sell his own or her own products, which is managed by the Busler, and we are transforming this venue, and on top it's a former bicycle shop. We're transforming it to an Expo Alternative, where we invited all these kind of institutions, initiatives, associations that we've been talking to over the course of the last 3 years to present themselves. So it will be kind of almost like a messe for Vereine and associations in Essen. And Simon Starling has been invited to bridge the gap to our museum history, so that's a bit complicated project too. But in the end, we are producing coal, with which a P8 train is being powered, and it will bring the Volkwang idea from Hagen once again to Essen. And we built a fictitious train station in a kind of very forgotten location. We are bringing also works of the Volkwang collection to IKEA, doing a show within the IKEA showing room. So we are exchanging works we're exchanging like posters or photographs that IKEA presents in their settings with posters from our poster collection. So this will be the best visited exhibition of the Volkwang ever, I guess. And Farid Shams is bringing a representation or a kind of look-alike of Rodin's The Bronze Age from our collection into the Neue Grüne Mitte, as you can see here. So, and that's just to give you an idea. It's varied, but we really try to work a lot kind of with the existing structure of the city, and particularly with the people of the city. to get a new kind of new perspectives on lives, but which very much comes from the city itself. Yeah, and it's open to the public from this Saturday until the 7th of August, 18 locations in the city center. It's free entry, and it's open from Tuesday to Sunday, noon to 8 in the evening. So this I wanted just to bridge, because I think it has some kind of ideas that fit rather well with the thinking around this year's Documenta and maybe even the Baukultur this year. And as I said before, I just wanted to give a little, what we are talking about today has been thought of for many years and decades, ever and ever again, with different representations. And I think it's important, if you're doing this, to get an understanding that we are probably not the first to pose these questions, but these questions have been posed by others before. I just tried to give you an idea from a European perspective, and I apologize that I'm not doing the global perspective, because first of all, I know not so much about the global perspective, and secondly, it would kind of take too long. But if you look back at the beginning, and for the years of our museum fund, Karl-Heinz Ostos, as I said, was really interested to bring art into public and to change society through kind of the dialogue between art and public. And this was not, he was not a singer, he was very early on, but he was not the only one. He was part of the Lebensreformbewegung. It was part of arts and craft that came aroused in these times, maybe even part of Jugendstil in a way, but it also developed to Deutscher Werkbund in that time, where they really started, a lot of people started to think about how to do Stadtgestaltung as well, so to really design city. And so Osthaus founded not only the Museum Volkmann, but also the Deutsche Museum für Kunst und Handel und Gewerbe, which was actually not a museum, but it was an agency doing exhibitions all over the place, internationally. He was quite important in founding the Bauhaus, and if you look in the 1920s, of course, Bauhaus had some ideas about bridging, like, or kind of getting life and architecture and arts united. And if you look at the time after the Second World War, we have, for instance, the International Situationist. It was actually a very small group, but still they had the same idea of kind of really interfering art into urban public life. And then in the following decades, there were a lot of different kind of strategies or kind of impulses, be it like Aktionskunst and happening, or pop art, trying to kind of bring pop elements into in relationship to life. We have Beuys with the Soziales Plastik, and in the 1990s we have what Nicolas Bourriaud called relational aesthetics. So already a time where lots of artists try to think more about process-based art, about participation, about involvement of the audience, or people becoming part of shared authorship, shared knowledge. And I think, again now, in these days, in this year, we are again at a certain point where all these subjects like diversity, sustainability, accessibility, gender, they have a lot of impact on what we're doing in the art world, in the museums. And I think it's, in a way, we need to relate to it then, but still try to keep some kind of independence in it. And so a lot of kind of social movements or political movements like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, just LGBTQIS, whatever, they have a lot of impact. And so there are more and more criteria being applied to the art and to the institutions as well. And you can sense this on an institutional sector, that like museums, if we apply for funding, most of the foundations have changed their policies, their strategies. They are now really like founding or supporting more or less like social projects, not necessarily anymore the core business of the museum, doing exhibitions. Or at least if you're doing exhibitions, you always have to relate to these topics, so that one can sense from the institutional sector and from the artistic sector, as we have already heard today, is working in collectives becomes more and more important. So shared knowledge, shared authorship, and I think it's quite interesting moment we are in, although there have been kind of already some kind of predecessors to these movements, but to ask basically the question, where are we getting to with this development is quite an important question to us, and how can we in a way also participate in development and just not only reply to this development. And I think we're trying to do this in a way with Fortman in the City project, and but maybe that's also a good starting point for our discussions now. I would like to know from Rowan Hooper and from you, what happens if the art becomes more and more ephemeral, more process-based? What does that mean to Baukultur? What does it mean to someone organizing a very big, major international art event? Because, of course, there's an audience coming to this event that has certain expectations. And the expectations, the traditional expectations and the conventional expectations is we're going to see objects. And these objects have a certain permanence in time. They are created to be there forever. But if we are now turning this upside down and not anymore focusing on the object or the result, but rather on the process, how do we deal with these expectations of the audience? And basically, that would be my first question to Rowan Hooper, but also to Peter Kalama. Thank you.
Wir dürfen gleich hier vorne bleiben, wenn Sie mögen. Vielen Dank. Das hat, glaube ich, jetzt, also vielen Dank für die Arbeit. Ich glaube, das hat jetzt sehr viele, also für mich auch Beziehungen aufgemacht zwischen den Themen und den Themen dieses Semesters.